now want to talk about one basic law of logic. There are many laws of logic, and usually you will hear people talk about 4 basic laws of logic. Laws of excluded middle and identity, but I want to talk about the law of non-contradiction. The law of non-contradiction is actually the foundation of all logic, and it's the foundation of all of our thinking. But you will be surprised as to how many people believe things that violate the law of non-contradiction. The law of non-contradiction basically says A cannot be non-A in the same way at the same time. A cannot be non-A in the same way at the same time. Now you can replace whatever you want with A. Brandon sitting here in this chair cannot be Brandon is not sitting here in this chair in the same way at the same time. So there's several components here. One of them is identifying whatever you're talking about. A, you could be talking about cars, you could be talking about prison, you could be talking about whatever. And non-A, which is its opposite. Not cars, not philosophy, not prison. Something that is not a car, not prison, not philosophy. The second part is the same way. Sometimes people might say A cannot be non-A in the same respect and at the same time. Sometimes you might hear someone say A cannot be non-A in the same sense and at the same time. So the second part here, A cannot be non-A in the same way, in the same sense, in the same respect. That second part is talking about its mode of existence, its sense of existence, its respect of existence or whatever. And then the last part has to do with time. So here's an example, and this one is a controversial example that many people don't think of, but many people believe this, right? If someone says something like, all religions are true, or all religions are paths to the truth, or all religious claims are true. All right, this is somebody who is not trying to follow any one particular religion or religious path. They're going to say all of them are true. Well, think for a minute about just one issue, whether or not there is a God. Is there a God or is there not? Only one of those can be true. Think about this, all right? A person cannot say there is a God, there is not a God. Those two things cannot both be true in the same way at the same time. A, let's say God's existence, can't be non-A, God's non-existence, in the same way at the same time, right? So now somebody might say, well, God could have died. So there is a God, there isn't a God, and they could say those two things are not logically contradictory because there was a God at one time who existed and now there's not. So it's true that there is a God or was a God and there's not a God. But the law of non-contradiction has to do with the time and the mode of being. You can't say, well, there's 2 gods. All right, well then there is a God. All right, it doesn't matter how many. The question is just, is there or is there not? So one of those has to be wrong. There either is or there isn't. They can't both be right. You might say, well, what if I said God exists in reality, but God doesn't exist in your mind? Those two things can be true at the same time. Okay, but we're not violating the law of non-contradiction because you're saying God exists in reality. So the sense, the respect, the mode of existence is reality. God does not exist in your mind. In your mind is the mode of existence, its place, its respect. So that's fine. You can say God exists in reality, God does not exist in your mind, and those are not contradictory. But again, the law of non-contradiction says A cannot be non-A in the same way at the same time. There either is a God or there isn't a God. If you specify God as being in existence right now at the same time and in the same way. So some things in the world are just false and some things are just true. And we might not want to come to grips with that. We might not want to believe that. That's fine. You can believe whatever you want to believe. But if you're going to be logically consistent, if you're going to make sense about the things that you believe, if you're going to be rational, then those beliefs that you hold ought to be consistent with each other. They ought to imply each other, and they can't violate the basic law of non-contradiction. Now, I'm fully aware that in the philosophical world, there are people who don't think that the law of non-contradiction is actually a law of logic. or that there's a sort of way around the law of non-contradiction. But I think that when you read their explanations, they have to assume the law of non-contradiction just to make their point. And so to me, they're self-defeating, or they're intellectually hypocritical, because the things that they are saying can't actually be true based on the way they're saying it. Sometimes you might also hear that what I'm promoting is an Aristotelian version of logic, right? That's just a 50-cent word that means the kind of logic that another ancient guy named Aristotle taught. Or you might hear that, well, you're just talking about Western logic that was common in Europe and America, not logic that you would find in India and China. There's Eastern logic and Western logic. And even that claim actually falls victim to the law of non-contradiction, because what you're saying is Western logic is not true, Eastern logic is true, right? They're saying either you believe one or the other, only one can be true. They're still using logic that would actually be identified as Western Aristotelian logic. So I think I've gone a little bit too far, labored a little bit too much on logic. There's a lot to be discussed. It can be kind of confusing at first when you first encounter this stuff, but as you gain more examples and read a little bit more, you will realize, I think, that logic is just basic common sense, and we don't often think in a commonsensical way. And so learning logic will help us to clarify, codify, and make our beliefs much more logical and rational. Now, there's a whole lot more I could discuss about logic. In fact, if there are people listening to this who have studied logic or philosophy, I didn't even discuss the differences between deductive and inductive logic. And I'm certainly not going to go into discussing formal logic and informal logic. So you can take whole semester-long courses in logic. You can get a degree in logic. I just wanted to introduce people to the study of logic. I remember being in prison. I was taking a class in humanities in my college class, and I was watching this show about Joseph Campbell, a guy named Joseph Campbell. And I loved his work and I loved his ideas. And I'm just in awe of the things he's saying. And a friend of mine, we go outside, and my friend was this fundamentalist, absolutist type. And I'm just enthralled by what Joseph Campbell said. And I was like, yeah, what do you got to say about that? And he said, well, most of what he said is illogical. It violates the law of non-contradiction. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, it violates the basic laws of logic. And I was like, what are the laws of logic? And he began to explain it to me. And I was like, wait a minute, you can study logic like a class, like math? He's like, yeah, you take classes in logic, just like mathematics. And so that was when I first realized that there was even such a thing as the study of logic. And so for me, that was really life-changing. It was a sort of a turning point in the way that I thought about the world. And I hope that's what this has done for you.